Whether you are brand new to art journaling or have a pile of alcohol markers that may be gathering dust, we have some inspiration here for you today. We are going to look at 3 different ways that we can use alcohol markers in our journals. I will show you how I personally use them. You do not need to be an expert here. If you're a beginner, these techniques are completely achievable. And if you're an advanced crafter or have done this loads of times before, I'm sure you'll enjoy the inspiration. So whether you're new to this or whether you're looking for that inspiration, let's just get into it. So for today's techniques, I am playing in my Pink Pig art journal. So this is the A5 one, and I have also just placed a piece of paper between this page that I'm working on and the next one, because we do get a lot of bleed through when it comes to using alcohol markers. We're going to address that in a moment, but although we will get bleed through onto the next page, I didn't want it going right through multiple pages, so that's why I've just placed the piece of card as a barrier. I am using the Sanjoki alcohol pens in this particular page. These are a nice budget brand that are available on Amazon, and I bought them in order to do my review of budget brands. So that's what we are using today, and they are perfect for building up a background, especially as they are low cost. So I am using a stencil. This stencil is one of mine. It's called Giraffe Spot. And although it's called Giraffe Spot, I'm not doing that today. Today I'm wanting to create a sort of a water effect. Now, one of the great things about alcohol markers is they do have a transparency to them, which means you can get really interesting colours and effects when you start to layer your pens. So I'm just keeping going over and over and over with this stencil with slightly different colours of those kind of aqua blues and just straight blues, sky blues, and trying to get this kind of watery look. When it comes to filling in the white, I'm still kind of going with these squiggly shapes because I just think the layers on all the blobs look really good. It makes them look more than one dimensional, which I think will be really fun when it comes to creating an under the water scene. At this point, it's not particularly looking under the watery, so I decided to just take it a bit further. So I am playing with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. So your alcohol markers are basically pigment with an alcohol carrier. So that means that there is alcohol in the pen with the pigment, which is why they react so beautifully to the isopropyl alcohol. It's basically what's in your pen. When you look at a blender pen, so you could create this technique with your blender pen by just kind of dabbing it quite a lot, but obviously that just kind of wastes the ink that is, or the alcohol that is in your blender pen, and this is kind of easier and quicker and cheaper to do it this way, just using isopropyl alcohol. So I kind of kept dotting and dotting and dotting till we got lots of different cells. I think it looks really cool, and actually it's made me want to try this technique. I think it would be fantastic to do hydrangeas or something like that using this technique, but that'll be for another day because we don't do that today. I also want to create this kind of shadow effect. It's kind of been all over kind of colour, tube colour talk, whatever you call it nowadays, where they create this spotlight effect by adding greys to the corner pieces. So I decided to give this technique a go, and it was as I was filling in this top half here, I suddenly realised you're not going to get a spotlight effect from the top of the ocean to the bottom of the ocean, because the sun doesn't work like that. It would light up the whole surface of the water, not just one tiny bit. So at that point I sort of panic slightly and think, oh my goodness, I've spent all this time creating this background and I've ruined it. So I work on trying to fix it. I bring in some yellows to kind of represent the sun, and then think, right, okay, well, I'm just going to have to somehow bring that top corner back. But again, this is where the semi-transparency kind of comes back into play. I put some more splodges. I also put some more alcohol down, and alcohol pushes away the ink. That's what creates these cells. So I knew if I put enough down, it would keep pushing the pigment away, and I would eventually get that top corner looking a lot lighter again, and making it work for the overall piece. So even with alcohol markers that are permanent, there are ways of rescuing mistakes. And actually quite often your colourless blender works really well for mixing mistakes as well. As I was doing this, I was thinking I quite fancied it looking like the depths of the ocean. So I just grabbed a black pen and I am literally scribbling here, nothing artistic. I'm using the chisel side of the nib and just scribbling and trying to keep the edges of the scribbles quite square, because I'm thinking this would be like a deep cave under the sea. Again, it wouldn't look quite as blocky as that under the sea because we have the movement of the water and the corals. So once again, come back in with isopropyl alcohol and just move it. I decided against the octopus. I decided I wanted it to look a little bit more mysterious and mythical and magical, so I pulled out one of the mermaids instead. So this is from the Aquatic Adventures digital collection, so she's pre-coloured image, so I just had to cut her out. I'm coming back over with the alcohol markers again, and I am just creating those shadows where the rock would be. So I'm just using a selection of greys just to kind of build that up so that she looks like she was part of the piece and painted in, not that she was just stuck on top. And also just to give her that sort of, again, magical look, I've come back in with the yellow pen and I'm just sort of colouring a circle around her so it's like she's glowing. Just to bring in a little bit more detail, I actually switched now to my acrylic markers, and I'm just adding a few different coloured dots within those rocks just to emulate the coral. I don't want to go over the top with this because I'm really liking how the contrast of those really dark rocks looks, but it just felt like it needed a little bit of something. I also come in with a fine line white pen just to add the edges of the rocks. Now that looks a little bit too stark when we've got all of those dark moody colours in, but even though I realised that, I also knew that I was going to do what I'm just doing now, which again was to pull out a light grey marker and to go over the ink. So again, because it's semi-transparent, those lines will show through, but they won't be quite as stark, so we've still managed to create that detail. And that is that page all done. So we've created a background using our alcohol markers. The second technique I'm going to call as Embrace the Bleed. So when you look at that piece of paper there, that is the opposite side to the page that we had just done. I was quite tempted just to grab my octopus that I was considering putting in the other page and sticking it down, but I wanted to show that you don't have to stick with the same theme even though we've kind of got a very similar background. So instead I have pulled out my forest stamps. So these are part of the Enchanted Forest collection, and I am stamping in some of the trees. I also just grabbing a black pen, and I'm also just following the lines. It's a little bit like reverse colouring here. I'm just following the lines that are already there, some of the shapes that are already there, and that is going to create the canopy of trees that we would have in the forest. And I'm almost using the background that we have been left with as a form of underpainting. Now I don't want to go on to the top of this with my alcohol markers again because those will bleed through to the page that we've just completed, and I love that. I don't want to have that altered in any way. So now I need to make sure that I use mediums that are not going to react or move those alcohol markers. So I have used my pencils. These are the Faber-Castell pencils, and what I am doing is just colouring in the detail. Again, similar to when I was drawing in the black lines, I am finding those shapes that are already there and just emphasising them a little bit, just darkening them a little bit. What's really good about doing this kind of technique is actually to colour with your pencils from beginning to end is a long process because you do lots of really fine gentle layers and it takes time for that pigment to build up in the page. I am probably working, well this part that I'm working on now, I'm actually only working on it with a very light pressure, and the tree trunks I did with a medium pressure. But because we've already got that colour and the depth in the background, we don't actually have to really work the colouring. So it is a good way of kind of speed colouring. I say speed colouring, it still probably took me an hour or so to colour all of this in real life time. This is obviously sped up somewhat, but it does actually shorten the process quite a lot having that underpainting detail, and so it's a really fun way of doing it. Plus if you were creating different backgrounds and things with shapes and things, you would have other ways that you could do that. And I think quite often when it comes to art journaling, dealing with a blank page is really difficult, so it kind of takes away that. I had decided to kind of make the house behind the house glow, and I absolutely hated it. It just made it look really green. Thankfully, the distress ink that I put down was a water-based product and everything else was a permanent product. So I just put water on and just lifted that bit of colour and put it back to how it originally was. So that was quite fortuitous. So yeah, quite often when we are creating a blank page is really difficult. Quite often I mop up my stencils and things in a journal so that when I come to it, I'm not faced with a blank page, I've got a starting point. And if you can embrace your alcohol markers like that as well, don't be afraid to use them in your art journals thinking, oh no, they're going to bleed through. Be aware of that. Do what we did before. We put the sheet of paper on, so we did get bleed through, but only onto one page. But what that does is that page then now provides you with a starting point rather than a blank page. And sometimes it's so much easier to journal when you're not faced with that blank page. So I'm just trying to kind of add a bit of definition. I add a little bit of distress ink around the edges. I just thought some of the canopy just needed a little bit more depth. So once again, I have pulled out some acrylic markers just to make those colours a little bit solid up the top there, and then eventually also I just add a few extra details just underneath the house. We're just going to give the mushrooms back their white dots again, and also just add details with dots for flowers, and this looks like a really nice moody forest. So from the same sort of alcohol details, we have gone under the sea and we have gone into the forest as well. Finally, I just add a few little scribbles with a black pen just to kind of emphasize the details. Definitely on the canopy, this was a technique that I enjoyed doing in another journal, and I've kind of carried it through. I think it was in a prompt book. So I discovered this scribbly technique and now it's taken over. I love it. Done the same with white. Then finally we just go in and add a doodly border and eventually a sentiment as well. And that is our second technique for using alcohol markers. So I've just got this sentiment which says, where leaves dance and stories breathe. And I'm just going to cut that down and pop that in. What I do end up doing as well though is I just get a little bit of ink left over from one of my distress ink brushes just to kind of take the whiteness away so that it blends into the page a little bit better. But considering that was a mop-up page, we have created a very magical fairy-like cottage in the woods, and absolutely love how this one turned out. The third way we are going to use our alcohol markers today, and perhaps the most obvious one, is we're just going to colour in. So I've decided to create a page using this house from the Bumble Buzz collection. This time I'm not building up my background with alcohol markers. I am going to use the alcohol markers in the feature element of this particular page. So I've got some stamps and some Distress Oxide. I'm creating a very loose honeycomb texture on the background. One of the best things about Distress Oxides is the way they react with water. So I spritzed it a bit and thought it still looked a bit boring, so I decided to put some pink and orange Distress Oxides on a tiny little stamping block and just add a little bit more detail. Once that had dried, I splashed some water on and lifted it up, and I think you really get the best effects with your Distress Oxides when you start sort of adding water. And then to try to get that, bring that hexagon detail back, I bring out a similar stamp, but it's just the outline just to get those hexagon details back. We're now going to stamp up this gorgeous little beehive, and we are going to use our alcohol markers just to colour. When colouring, I like to work on a smooth card. This is just a super smooth card. I do like Express It card for alcohol markers, but it is very, very expensive. But you do tend to find that a good quality printer paper will work as well, because printer paper is actually designed to take ink, because that's exactly what it does. It prints, ink is added to it when it goes through the printer. But not cheap copier paper, the really good quality stuff works quite well. So we just colour up our image. I'm also just adding a tiny little bit of alcohol markers to the base of that page just to ground it. Shout out to Shuttle Art pens. I love the fact that the Shuttle Art pens have a brush nib and a fine nib. Honestly, these have been revolutionary to me. They're a real budget pen, and they're definitely my favourites of the budget pens that I have reviewed. And for that reason, because I can get really fine detail and brush nib detail, love it. So just adding a bit more shadow under the beehive just so it sits properly. That little hexagon below the beehive was really bothering me as well. So when I came in to be adding my details like the dangles and the frame, I also decided to, with the black pen, try and add some scribbly grass detail down below just to try and disguise that little bit of hexagon that just didn't look quite right there. Again, going in with a white paint pen for added like little details. It just helps to make things pop. And again, we have a sentiment. Home is my favourite place to be. And that is this one all done too. So we have used 3 fun techniques in this particular video. We have created a background, we have embraced the bleed, and we have used it for colouring. If you enjoy this kind of thing and you would like to see more things to do with alcohol markers, you may want to check out a couple of the videos here, and I will be back with you next Friday for some more art journal inspiration. So I will see you then.